Whether you are a fan of Jennifer Lynn Lopez or not, by the end of the documentary, you will have a ton of respect for her as an artist, as an icon, as a cultural phenomenon. If you watch this documentary, you might even roll some tears. I did. Spoilers, I am a fan of JLo, so this review won't be the roast fest you might expect. Today, we are talking about the 2022 Netflix documentary about Jennifer Lopez, Halftime. This review is going to be slightly different from the reviews we've done so far. Only one section will be dedicated to the documentary exclusively, the actual review of it. The rest of the video, I want to talk a little bit about Latinas, stereotypes, and the media. Even though we have come a long way, we still have a distance to go. Why are we talking about media stuff and stereotypes with this documentary? Well, JLo has been blazing the trail for Latinas in the media for 20 years now. Like her or loathe her, she has been paving the way for Latinas, for being a strong, loud, independent woman, for how media is consumed, and for body positivity. Yes, body positivity. We owe a lot to Jenny from the block, and I'm glad this documentary helped point it all out. Let's get one thing out of the way before we move on. Let's talk about the most controversial part of this documentary. Everyone has been talking about it. Everyone has been up in arms about it. Everyone has been getting it wrong. JLo said that sharing the halftime stage with Shakira was the worst idea ever in the history of ideas. Most everyone is taking it to mean that JLo thinks she is better than and shouldn't have to share the spotlight with someone as lowly as superstar Shakira. If you watch the actual documentary, you'll see that it's not about sharing the stage with Shakira. It's about the NFL saying that one Latina isn't enough to do a spectacular, powerful, iconic show. You need two. And not just that, they won't get any more time to perform. They both will get about 5 minutes of stage time each. JLo was just reacting to the lack of respect on the NFL's part. They could have had one show with JLo and the next year with Shakira, and they both could have had the 12 minutes to put on the show of their lives. That's it. JLo felt it was just as disrespectful to Shakira as it was to herself. Of course, because JLo has the reputation of being an impossible narcissistic diva, everyone thought the worst of her, without even watching the documentary. The NFL hates people of color, women, and especially women of color. And this double headliner thing is further proof of that. That's it. Outrage internet culture strikes again. Folks who want to be outraged, how about being outraged at the NFL? If JLo really hated Shakira, she would not have yielded 2 minutes of her set to share the stage with Shakira. Everyone needs to calm down. There are actual problems we need to be outraged about currently. Now that we got that out of the way, let's get into the meat, to the substance of this whole thing. This was a super well done documentary. If you haven't watched it yet, I do recommend you guys check it out. The Halftime documentary tells the story of Jennifer Lopez and her start as a dancer to being on the biggest stage in the world at the Super Bowl. Something that completely went over my head, but luckily my sister pointed it out to me, is that this documentary feels like it was supposed to revolve around JLo being nominated for and maybe maybe even winning an Academy Award. The Oscar nomination was supposed to be presented as the pinnacle of her career. All the hard work and acclaim since her performance in Selena until now. A nice culmination of her career and proving you can still absolutely kill it at age 50. The Oscar did not happen. I've said it before and I'll say it again. 2019's Hustlers is a fantastic movie. If I could, I would teach an entire course just on that movie. The filmmaking craft is excellent. The storytelling is superb. Even the problematic aspects of the movie are worth talking about. What elevates the movie to a whole nother level is JLo's performance. JLo wasn't nominated for the Oscar, and that's a crime. I predict, though, that JLo will win an Oscar for a lesser movie and performance. It happened with DiCaprio and Pacino. Mark my words, it's gonna happen with her. Since JLo was not nominated for the Academy Award, the documentary had to change its focus, and they went with the halftime show as being the pinnacle of her career thus far. It sucks that the best work of her acting career was ignored completely by her acting peers, but the whole documentary was better for it, I think. For the pinnacle to be the Oscar, in hindsight, seems weak. The Oscar was for a movie about the body economy. No one will ever respect sex work, no matter how honest or important it is. There is no universal politique attached to JLo's performance in that movie. The halftime show, featuring the biggest Latinas in show business, and JLo taking advantage and making a political, social, humanist message, was an important stroke of genius. It was more powerful, memorable, and earnest than any acting performance could ever be. I'm talking about a halftime show that I rewatched after watching the documentary, and I was weeping. I was crying so much. JLo is singing about the dance floor, and I'm crying like I'm watching Bambi. Maybe I'm exaggerating the importance of this particular halftime show. Maybe I'm giving JLo more credit than she might deserve. What I am not exaggerating about is how this documentary made me feel about being a Latina, JLo as an icon, and Latin Hispanic folks in the media in general. Before we get to those last two, let's talk about the two things I appreciated so much in this documentary. First up, I enjoyed the fact that JLo was not afraid of showing and highlighting her failures. As someone who has failed at every single thing she's tried, if you are watching this, you are witnessing yet another failure of mine. I appreciated JLo showing that a setback or an outright failure isn't the end of the world. We tend to have the idea that if you fail at something, your life is over and you should lie in the gutter and wait for death. A setback or failure is something to learn from and should help you move forward in your life. It's not the end of the world. It just means that you either need to work harder at it, or maybe that thing wasn't for you. You need to find the thing that is for you, so then you can go and do that. Not to get too cliched about it, but failure is not the end. Hopefully, it's only the beginning. Failure will prepare you if you're lucky enough for something good to happen in your life, for once. The other thing I like seeing that related to the first thing is that life does not end at 40. JLo is in an industry that is not kind to women, especially women of color. Only a couple of white women are allowed to exist in Hollywood over the age of 50. Rarely do you see a badass like JLo still killing it at 50. Looking better than ever, giving the best performance in a movie and on stage in her life at 50. As someone who is racing toward 50 myself, I appreciated seeing a brown woman representing us and proving the best time in your life is still in front of you. This dang documentary pumped me up in a way I was not prepared for. And it makes me feel that even though I am way over middle age and a colossal failure in everything I do, I can still keep going forward, and it's never too late to succeed. It's never too late to dominate a thing. Never too late, maybe even to find love. Never too late. JLo is seen as the typical prototype of a Latina. Someone says Latina somewhere and everyone immediately thinks JLo. That's fair. You want the best example to represent all of us. JLo is arguably the best example of a badass Latina, which brings up a question we do need to talk about. Yes and no. It's unfair to expect one person to be the perfect, universal, exceptional example for an entire ethnicity. The exceptional example of all the Latinas in the US and possibly in all of Latin America. Women, and in particular women of color, have to live up to the highest societal standards ever. Ladies, we have to be examples of femininity
and be sexy but not trashy and not a prude. You have to know what you want, but you can't be too pushy or loud. You have to be informed, but not too opinionated or know more than what a man in your orbit knows.
That hurts their egos. You have to be thin, but not too thin.
You have to be hot, but not know that you're hot or use it to your advantage. You have to be fertile, but not bother anyone with your menstrual problems. If you age, you can't have any gray hair or wrinkles.
We could go on picking on every single BS thing society expects out of women. Men too, but that's a different video. And that's just if you're a white woman. If you're a woman of color, watch out for a whole just litany of BS rules you have to abide by. So to expect JLo to be the perfect example, role model, prototype of a Latina who represents us all is unfair to her and to us. We are not all the same, as much as folks want to put us into little boxes and call it a day. We are not. However, JLo is an excellent representative to have out there in the world. Tell someone you're a Latina and most likely they'll say, "Oh, like JLo?" And you're like, "Yes, yes I am," pretending you're that hot and successful. As someone who used to date a lot of white boys, they have a certain fetish when it comes to Latinas. They expect a porno version of JLo while I'm this guy from Total Recall. Even though we don't all look like JLo, our Afro-Latina sisters remind us that Latin folks come in different varieties and flavors. As someone more on the Anglo side of the Latina-ness, I lose the sexy but gain privilege because I lean more toward the white side of the genetic pool. As far as looks and fetishes and stereotypes go, JLo does not represent us. As far as someone who broke barriers, changed the internet, and has an amazing work ethic, I'm glad JLo was out there representing. If you watch the documentary, they point out all the things Jenny from the block has done to change our media forever. It's extraordinary that she doesn't get more credit for being an important icon, not just a Latin icon, but an icon. Who would have thought that I'd be here hyping up Jennifer gosh dang Lopez, but that is how good this narrative of the documentary is. Let me know if I'm exaggerating or she really does deserve me gushing all over her in this video. Now, is JLo completely flawless, not problematic, and walking perfection? Of course not. But as a woman of color, she gets little to no slack cut, and that's unfair. But like the badass example she is, JLo continues to kill it and get better and better as the years go by. She doesn't need hype from me, the biggest loser who ever losered, but I feel it's necessary. Other folks who have achieved less, work less hard, and think they're already perfect and don't need to improve, those folks get a lot of praise and acclaim for being lesser than JLo. Much, much lesser than JLo. And I want folks to know that she should get more praise and acclaim. She's earned it. I watched the 2020 Super Bowl halftime show live. I had no idea it was overtly political until I saw the documentary. When I saw these kids in cages, it did not occur to me that JLo was making reference to our real-life dystopia of children in cages. Immigration crimes against humanity, but make it fashion. JLo wanted to make a political statement after 2 decades of being apolitical. JLo didn't want to beat people over the head with the message, and I think she kind of succeeded. The fact that it went over my head is a failure, but her showing Latin excellence on the biggest stage in the world, that was a huge success. It was also successful that the show wasn't pegged as too woke or too politically correct, like so many things are nowadays. Side note, if you think everything is too woke now, you have not been paying attention to anything in the media for the last 150 years. All TV shows have had a very special episode. All coming-of-age movies deal with issues of the day. Every time something happens in the world, it is reflected in the media. That's how art is. That's how art has always been. That's what art will continue to do. Everyone needs to calm down. Like I said a few moments ago, JLo is slightly more political now than she has been in the past. It reminds me a little of when in the college years of Saved by the Bell, when AC Slater discovers that he is Latino and becomes a Chicano activist for an episode. Remember that? Yes, I'm old. I would bet the farm JLo has always been acutely aware of Latino stereotypes and how we are perceived as a culture, as an ethnic group. We are as diverse as it gets, but in the American media landscape, we are all the same. Being super aware of these tropes, I'm sure that's why we haven't seen JLo play a lot of them. We'll talk about the 2 she kind of has played into, but even that's debatable. We have never seen JLo as a Spanish-only speaker. We saw JLo once as a maid, and that was more of a Cinderella story and how being a hot, hardworking Latina is better than being an uptight, boring, entitled white lady. Plus, that movie is about the maid. JLo wasn't the background character that barely gets acknowledged. So there's that. Let's talk about 2 prominent Latina stereotypes we see in the media. Debatably, that JLo plays into. In academia, the way I remember it from school, Latinas were mostly in the sex pot and the Spitfire role. They have combined the 2, and Latinas are spicy Latinas. Ay, ay, ay. Spicy Latinas include all the negative stereotypes about Latinas being loud, feisty, stupid hot, clowns, and yelling at you in Spanish. Spicy Latinas are more of a caricature of the Latin culture than real people with depth and nuance. JLo, in her movie roles and in her media persona, is the spicy Latina, adding depth and nuance and dignity. JLo has been the model to be loud, be opinionated, to not be afraid to challenge social norms. Since that attitude and badassery is happening in the movie roles she takes, the demeaning, belittling happens in the tabloids, by the news media. Yes, the lamestream media cucks. In the documentary, there was a section where they pointed out how terribly JLo has been treated by the media just for existing. And because she doesn't allow her movie roles or her persona to be anything less than exceptional with dignity, does the media and society at large feel the need to belittle her personally? Because Latin folks have to fit into these preconceived negative stereotypes. If you dare to try and do things outside of that, someone somewhere will be there to put you in your place. It's interesting. Since JLo dared not to play into those stereotypes, she has been taken seriously in a movie with a lot of prestige and critical acclaim. JLo has snobs and other film nerds like me saying that her Oscar snub is a crime against humanity. No hyperbole. Plus, she has dominated a genre of movie that is exclusive to skinny, boring white ladies. The romantic comedy. I don't like rom-coms at all. Much like porno messes up boys and their expectations of love and sex, rom-coms mess up women and their expectations of love and intimacy, and what is healthy behavior versus what is harmful behavior. That is a discourse for another day, but regardless, that is the domain of white ladies, and JLo has made that genre her puto. You don't look at JLo as a lead in a rom-com and say, what's this house cleaner, chola, side character doing as the lead in this movie? You see JLo in a rom-com and think you need to pick a better genre to dominate. At least that's what I think. Also, in the last year, she came out with a rom-com where her character is engaged to Maluma Baby. Mwah. Even though she is 52 and he's 28, you're not like, that's unrealistic. You're like, hey, Maluma, why are you cheating on JLo? I know you're a boy, but stop it. JLo is breaking down cultural barriers and also age barriers. Sure, it's because she is stupid hot, but regardless, she's doing it. Again, JLo is at the top of her game at the age of 52 in an industry that discards women after the age of 30. JLo takes the sex pot stereotype and uses it to her maximum advantage. That is how racism and stereotypes should be treated. They should be used to our advantage. And who is showing us how to do it? Jennifer mother-loving Lopez. That's who. I should have just ended the video there, taken off my mic, dropped it. But I do have final thoughts. If you can't tell already, I think everyone should watch this documentary. Halftime, it's on Netflix. Rewatch the Halftime show too. I'll leave a link to it in the carcancha down below. I never thought I'd be a JLo stan, but here I am hyping her up like I'm a guest rapper on one of her songs. I get super passionate and defensive when it comes to Latin Hispanic things in the media and in life. Duh, that's why this channel exists. Much like JLo isn't the perfect, flawless representation of all Latin Hispanic folks, I'm not either. Both of us try to do our best and hope that folks find our work compelling and entertaining. The more exposure and visibility we get as an ethnicity, as a people, the better it is across the board for all of us. The more exposure and visibility we get, the more diversity we will see in the media. We won't all be expected to be JLo, although that's not a bad expectation to have. JLo discovering or rediscovering her Latinaness is a thing all of us go through at different points in our lives as Latin Hispanic folks or immigrant kids in general. You're always expected to assimilate and pretend you're not in any way ethnic or different than the norm. White folks use other ethnicities for clout and aesthetics, while you have to deny that part of yourself. Then there comes a point for all of us when you realize your background and your ethnicity is interesting and cool, actually. Folks from your ethnic group are accomplished and have changed the world for the better. Then you're like, why am I trying to be white and boring when I can be brown and interesting? Happens to us all. It happened to JLo during this halftime show, and I love to see it. I hope more Latin Hispanic kids have this realization earlier in their lives. I am dying to know your guys' thoughts on this documentary, and also for all my cringy gushing over JLo. Let me have it in the comment section down below. If you guys want to send me messages on Snapchat, you can. The name on there is LatinXplanation, no S. I'll answer any questions or check out any requests you guys might have. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, salud, mi familia.